Racism Educational Services podcast, broadcast. We have three special guests today. Each one of them are brand ambassadors for Quarantine Racism Educational Services. And so, before we go into the topic, how bias appears in schools, everyday examples of classroom bias, I'd like for everybody to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I guess I can start. My name is Dr. Mishkat Al Mumin. Oftentimes people call me Dr. A. I have been in education for more than 20 years. I'm a dynamic leader focusing on equitable education because I want to empower every single student in my classroom or in my program. I worked across nonprofits, academia, and government. And thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Excellent, excellent.
I'm Hannah. I have a master's in public policy, and I did some research on education policy while doing that. And I'm also just personally passionate about education as someone who has faced a lot of inequity and trauma in education. So it's very important to me to have
Ec-
equity in education, and especially right now, it's important to emphasize and figure out what we can do to maintain integrity.
Excellent, excellent.
I am Tara Jones. I've been teaching for about 15 years. I have a bachelor's in early childhood education and then got my master's degree in special education, which I've been doing for about the past 12, 15 years. Um, I became interested in this just based on different schools and experiences that I personally witnessed, and kind of I wanted to move forward with social media podcast, and kind of do a different take on it. I want to do some interviewing as the learner, um,
Mhm.
and so to kind of help make others aware of things that are going on inside the schools that they either don't know about or don't want to know about, or kind of look the other direction sometimes.
Well, that's excellent because that really does lead into our topic of how bias appears in schools. So, have any of you all ever experienced bias, and if so, what were those circumstances, and how did it make you feel?
I personally experienced bias throughout my entire education journey, so to speak, starting from the first day when my teacher at the time slapped me on the face just because I used my left hand to write. And she told me, don't use your evil hand.
Mm,
My journey with bias continued. My first day at the law school at Baghdad University, the professor enters and he looks at the first row that consists of 10 women among more than 50 men. And he said, what are you women all doing here? Go to the nursing school where you belong. And the class burst in laughter.
mm,
Um, I understand what it means to be different and how that impacts your learning. So when I became a teacher, I took it upon myself to relate to every student in my classroom, regardless of their background and where they came from. And that led me to establish the communication of success, the consultancy firm that I use and put at the disposal of educators and leaders, especially in the nonprofit arena, to help them feel understood not only heard. So that's the key here. And my ultimate goal is to help every student feel understood, not only heard.
Excellent. Anyone else?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of different experience. It's hard to pick just one. I have a lot of different ones that I'm gonna mention throughout this panel, but when you were speaking about that, I as well have dealt with bias all throughout my education, um, starting in first grade, well, even like daycare before that and preschool. But in first grade, that was the first time I was called the N word, and it was by a classmate of mine, and the teacher did nothing about it. Um, so yeah, that was sort of my first experience that yeah
Excellent. Very
that I
good.
dealt with, and there's a lot of other ones that I dealt with, and continuing into college, and my master's program was very isolating as well because I thought there weren't a lot of students of color in general throughout my education undergrad, and then for my master's program, it was even like yeah, it was just me and a few others. So, and I dealt with a lot of racism from different professors, and it's very isolating, and you can feel really alone sometimes.
Hmm.
But I'm glad I found certain professors and teachers and colleagues that I could lean on and get support from.
Very good.
From kind of a
Now, who?
different
Now, who?
aspect.
Did you tell us who you are?
Yes.
Oh, we
Sure.
already did that. Okay, my fault. I
No,
just want to make sure everybody
no,
knows who
no.
you are. So
Uh,
go ahead. I apologize.
no. You're fine. I'm like that all the time. So I would say one of the experiences I had was an interview. The head administrator was who hired me was a white female, um, and there were several people of different races who also interviewed who actually had more experience than I did, and it was a predominantly black school. And she hired me, and I think I don't. She didn't get quite what she expected. expected. Um, so I'm not sure if she was happy with her decision, like later on in the school year. Um, but it was, just an awareness. And there were 9 administrators there. She was the head administrator, and I will say, there was out of 9, there was one of color, and I feel like she brought that person on to have someone of color on the team.
Okay. Okay.
That's that is just an opinion.
So we've all experienced bias, and in one form or another. I've experienced it, but I'm not going to go into it. How does how does the bias go from society then to impacting the classroom atmosphere or the school environment? How does that happen?
You see, the classroom does not exist in a vacuum. The classroom exists in a society.
Hmm.
So, if the society practices certain biases or prejudices, that will appear in the classroom. It's very difficult to create a classroom in isolation of what's going on within the society.
Hmm.
So, in my case, for example, at least at the law school, at the time, there were few women in, the legal profession. There were few women in the school. There was always one female professor.
Hmm.
So if the norm is the law school is only open for men, then women should not be here. You are doing something you shouldn't be doing.
Mm,
Furthermore, even in hiring, at the time Iraq was ruled by the Hussein regime, when the school wants to hire, the ad reads only male candidates will be considered. That
wow.
literally what it said. So if you are creating that environment, then the classroom will follow. You will not have an inclusive classroom where everything outside of it is exclusive.
Hmm.
So that has been my experience.
Okay. Now, Tara, I thought you said something very interesting, and that was when you were hired that the administrator didn't get what she expected. And
Mm-mm.
so, in hiring you, she had a bias. Will we agree
Yes,
with that? Will we
I,
all agree with
I,
that?
oh,
Okay.
I agree.
So how did that play out?
Sh- I'm not sure she's really fond of me anymore. I feel like I came in, and and it when an interview as a white female, sat down, we had a discussion, um, and whenever I started building the relationship with my students, um, there were certain there were certain students who would be disciplined to a higher degree.
Mhm.
Not just that, there was even one of the student, they would come in and, there were some that I would have check in with me and I have them the snack in the morning or whatever, and just to make sure they made it that day. Um, One of my students was a black male, and his girlfriend was a white female. They got into some trouble, outside of the school. Um, she was able to return, and he was not.
Wow.
Um, and I don't think she was happy that I went to court for him and wrote, recommendation letters and those types of things. So, um, it ended up being to where she would just not even face me or acknowledge me or any of that. And I'll say, like, and I'm still learning. My daughter's biracial, and I didn't have an understanding, and I still am not there. There's things that have happened, or words she's been called, or way she's been treated, and I'm like, wait a, that's still like,
Right. Right. Unacceptable.
so.
Okay.
And
So
a lot of them, they don't have the resource. So it's like just her. Yeah, she doesn't like me
okay. So
very
what I was thinking about was as a special education teacher, um, because of the way they move historically underserved students
much.
into special education classes, the reality was that that was going to be your majority. That's the
Right.
reality.
And I
And
will say, approximately 80% or more of the students I got in special education were the ones who had faced trauma and didn't behave the way the school wanted them to.
so they were classified. Now the
Yeah.
interesting thing is, and I got to go to Hannah for a minute here. The interesting thing is that Hannah, do you believe that you could have benefited from a teacher, or let me rephrase that? In what ways would you have benefited from a teacher like Tara, who had that different perspective?
I did actually. I had some teachers that were big advocates for me and professors and such, but the problem was it wasn't only teachers too that I had issues with and students. It was also like the principal, superintendent that didn't they just didn't advocate for me and made it seem like I was the problem for what I was going through. And actually they told me like with all the racist bullying from teachers, administrators, students, they told me I should go to a boarding school for orphan children and children with different behavioral issues. So, yeah,
Wow.
I had advocates, but it was people that were higher up.
Higher. Mm.
Well, I
Mm.
had like one or two for elementary and middle school, like one or two teachers that were advocates for me, but the rest, yeah, it was tough. I had a teacher tell me that I was never gonna amount to anything.
Well, you showed her, right? Or him, whoever it is.
Hmm.
You definitely showed him. Absolutely. So we know that these things are creeping into our classes. It is a reality. How do we, one, help? I mean, there are various components here. How do we help the entire school community as well as the community that they serve?
Well, you can't turn your head. I know it's easier for a lot of people, honestly, to just turn their head, but it's not okay for the students or staff. It's just if someone doesn't stand up, it's not going to stop. And then those students need to know because they'll just give up. I mean, they'll give up if you're their person and you show belief in them, and you earn their respect. They're great. Everything will, confidence, everything just can shoot through the roof. But you know, if they're labeled this or that, and then they're just dismissed from school, or
Hmm.
a lot will just most will just give up.
Anyone else like to add?
Give the student a voice. Each student need to be heard, need to be understood. Classroom should be safe places for people to express themselves. So one thing I did with my students, I would end my class a little bit early and then ask them to give me feedback. I
Hmm.
would assure them always that I would not retaliate. Trust me on this. I'm here to help you. I just want to make sure that I am helping you.
Hmm.
Then they would open up and start, talking to me and give me feedback that I need. In one case, I had a student who I taught foreign languages here in the United States, and I taught it in military schools. So I had one student who said, sometimes when you check on me, or by the time you would check on me, I forgot what is it I wanted to ask. So I created a sign for him. When I'm, explaining the concept, he can raise it and and the sign would say, I need a moment, I didn't understand. I made sure that whatever was, bugging him, I'm on it.
Hmm.
And then I would, spend more time checking on him, making sure every single question he had is answered and the concept is quite clear.
Hmm.
But if you want to make sure that biases don't seep into the classroom, you have to give student voices.
Okay.
So even when I became later on department chair, I formed a committee from students to allow them to contest the score that they get on their tests. You see, military schools are very well structured. And oftentimes, because it's military, as a learner, you don't have a lot of room to express yourself when it comes to grading.
Hmm.
So this committee would interview every student who said that they got one grade, even 1 point missing from their grade. Student excelled, giving them a voice, making sure that this voice is incorporated in the decision making process is crucial. You cannot go without that.
Very good. Very good. So you have offer the recommendation for the students, but we also have parents, we have administrators, we have other staff, and we have teachers.
And I just wanted to add on to what Tara and Dr. A were saying. Touching upon like the bias that teachers may have affecting students, I feel like it either has like one or two effects. And for me, um, it had like an imposter syndrome effect on me. And basically, I tried and I still do try to like prove myself in every situation. I try to prove myself through education. If I work hard, if I get this done, like I can prove that I belong here and I'm able to succeed. But it can also have the opposite effect of students just giving up and just feeling like whatever they do, it doesn't matter. So why should they put the work in? And unfortunately, we have to discuss like student success levels being lower because of that as a big factor. Because I hate to say, but some teachers just don't really care about the students in some of these situations with the bias that's happening,
Hmm.
especially if it's intentional. They might not think about the feelings necessarily that are happening, but they're going to be like, oh, the success rates are off. We need to get our scores up. So maybe I should hear them out a little bit. Maybe I should do this or that. And also, right now, with the federal policies that are happening, a lot of people are scared to stand up for what's right. And I feel like we've been doing a good job of addressing that, but that really needs to be emphasized because that's a tough issue right now. Even for people that want to do the right thing, they've been scared lately.
Absolutely. Anyone else? So I'll tell you about a bias I had. I'm a former math teacher, and I had a gender bias as a teacher, and I was actually harder on the boys than I was the girls. And the girls, they would do all kinds of terrible things to those boys. And what I was trying to manage was I understood that as black men, that they had to look at things differently to survive. And that was my justification. But it was wrong. that's that's the reality because I should have treated them all the same. So where I'm going with this is how do we help teachers who come with those biases and they really and truly mean well, but it's still something that could eventually either hurt or harm the kids? Because even the girls who were getting preferential treatment, they could move on and think that that was a life expectation, right? That's a reality, right? So how do we help those? How do you help somebody like me?
Honestly, I have two answers for you.
Okay.
One is through the communication of success, I have started a special offer for teachers. It's 150 per hour, but it can include 10 teachers.
Hmm.
So the 150 will be divided among these teachers, and then we will discuss the issue.
Hmm.
And we come up with tools and strategies, and they leave with something tangible. The second answer that I have is our wonderful course, How to Build, racial proper racial relationship with your students. And it's a course that comes with a book. The teacher can keep the book and go back to it for references. We are available to them as ambassadors to discuss any concept within the book or the course. The total price is $99. And perhaps during these difficult times the price, even though discounted, still a lot.
Hmm.
With that, I can help teachers write grants to purchase the course. If the administrator at school is hesitant to buy the course, we can write the grant together, submit it to a grantor, get funding, and get teachers some help. Furthermore, the grant itself can include several components. So, not only getting the course, but getting them any other type of help they need. Our teachers need us, and that's why we are here to help them, and we can do a lot for them.
I have a question that kind of bounces off that. What do you think can be done to help teachers who want to help and do the right thing? However, administration or people may put a stop to it. So, out of fear, like there was one point where I was told to stop handing out snacks and have people check in, and
Mhm.
but then they would stop coming to school. So I was like, trying to say, hey, and it was only with a specific demographic of students, and then I was told I would be, written up, and so for 2 days I stopped, and then my students weren't checking in. A couple of them were coming to school, so I took the write up, but you only get so many write ups before, and so I know some teachers out there with good heart who want to, but they also have families to take care of, and they're
Hmm.
scared.
Absolutely.
So that's
So before I interject, I want to give Hannah and or Dr. A chance to respond.
I'm happy to chime in, and then I'll invite Hannah for her wonderful insights. Um, I have experienced something similar. So, as I said, I worked in military schools, and they were very strict, and oftentimes they did not allow food or snacks or anything to that effect. And it varies. Sometimes, they prohibited all. Sometimes they, let certain things slide or be acceptable at that time period. But what I've learned through the process is I can give students different things, not only snacks or food, or focus on the immediate relief that comes from the joy of sharing food, as important as that may be.
Hmm.
And I had students coming to my office saying straight to my face, Professor, we are hungry. Do you have anything we can eat?
Hmm.
And these are service members, they are well taken care of, well provided for. But it doesn't mean that they have money in their pockets at that time. What I did is I tried to create a rewarding mechanism,
Hmm.
no matter how simple it is, even if it says at the time, I used to give them stars. So I would, literally write or draw a star on them, and if you collect 10 of them, for example, you will get certain other rewards or be acknowledged as the champion. I even bought little trophies at the time. So whatever non-monetary or whatever that is not acceptable at the time, I can go around it and make something that is acceptable.
mhm.
And then policies change. So the last time I taught, these little trophies were everywhere. Teachers were celebrating them. Even the military instructor came and celebrated them.
Hmm.
And to go back to Hannah's point, where she felt that oftentimes, she was targeted with discipline, or felt like, or teacher told her that she won't be amount to anything. I did the exact opposite. We have something called counseling. And oftentimes, from the term, it's associated with either you didn't do your homework or you did something horrible at the class. But I created something called positive counseling.
Hmm.
So I would identify what that student did well, and I would write it up, eloquently describe what it is and its impact, and then give it to the student. I would, stop the class, clap a little bit, and hand it to the student, and it goes to their unit and they can use it for a promotion.
Hmm.
So, these, what I call them small measures, but impactful one. can
Hmm.
last a lifetime, you know. So, a recommendation from you, for example, or a note of appreciation, something to that effect, to
Mhm.
elevate the student and, give them the confidence they need.
Hmm. Very good.
Hannah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I was gonna say I did have a few supportive teachers, but not having those teachers that were like basically harassing me and taunting me about things would have been a big difference if they at least you know cared a little bit more or reflected on their bias. It would have been more helpful to, because even though I did succeed, I didn't really like thrive
Hmm.
because of that. And it was very stressful, like up throughout my entire education. And then with the specific circumstance you're speaking about with giving students snacks, I was thinking one way that you could kind of get around that is you could make it like a thing for like extra credit. So if a student asks a question to either you privately or in class, if they raise their hand and make a comment, or if you have like an extra question, like an extra credit question on a worksheet, then they can get a snack after doing one of those
Very good.
actions.
And to kind of bounce off that, I think another one of the issues was they wanted to kind of stop. Some of them weren't even my students. Friends would bring kind of up, and then they were just told to stop checking in general, or stopping by or checking in,
Right.
and so it made it difficult. And some would, say, "Hey, I slept outside last night.
Mm.
You've got a blanket," and it was difficult to have to say no, to where
Absolutely.
when I
Well,
did,
what I was going to say was, because your question was, how do you deal with a subordinate that's in opposition to you? And so I like to use a concept called personal mastery, which was developed by Peter Senge. And essentially, what you would do is you would find out what is personally important to this principal. So you go back to policy and you go back to their policies in regards to um, civil rights. And you say, I'm helping you meet that policy. Now, when you say to them, I'm helping you, now you're making them believe that because of what you're doing, the outcome is going to help them. And then you could say other things like, well, the students are checking in on me, right?
mm-hmm,
Would you rather us for us to stop that and then one of these students decide they want to come and shoot the school up? Which one do you want?
mm-hmm,
So I would rather for them to come and check in with me, make sure that they're okay, and then we know that they're not a potential problem. And then finally, as far as the eating, I would talk about Maslow. And Maslow talks about the very first need that people need is they have to eat. Now, whatever her name was, you're going to have standardized testing in a couple of months. And so these kids they need to eat so they can be prepared. As a matter of fact, maybe you should start some type of uh, food program so that the outcome will be you'll get better test scores for
mm-hmm,
servicing historically underserved students. And the reason I know all this because I had principals that were the same way. And this is how I dealt with them. And when I got finished with
bring up the test
and
score. Yes.
when I got finished with them, they were like, "Oh, leave him alone. Let him because he's really helping me." And then the final thing is,
Mm-hmm,
would you rather have a parent to come up and be irate because their kid is acting out because they can't get any food from the school, and then that go to a school board meeting and your name is mentioned. Now I'm still taking the perspective that I'm helping you. But I want to pause everybody for a minute because I was online and there's a person named I'm not going to mention the name. Well, her name's here. Her name is Shannon Scott
Mm.
Weschler, and she made a comment, and I want to get you all's response. She said, "I had a male student of color ask me, why are there no black teachers here? Most of my students are diverse. I asked him if that bothered him. He said yes. I told him that he could be a teacher. He totally had the leadership." What do you all think about that posting?
I have been reading Shannon posting, throughout the conversation, and I want to thank you, Dr. Campbell, for acknowledging it because I was about to point them out. They are
Hmm.
really very well thought of and very in sync with what we are talking about.
Hmm.
What I want to say is that oftentimes, that perspective of, we learn from people like us don't get a lot of attention in schools. And I have seen that in many colleges and universities, even, nonprofits that engage in education.
Hmm.
Until someone points it out, then we look at it. But I want to, acknowledge and appreciate what Shannon did because
Hmm.
she empowered her student. She gave him the tools and the resources he needs to think about himself. I also did something similar. I established a project or took an initiative in the school. I called it Student as Teachers and literally made them teach in the classroom because they wanted to mentor their peers.
Hmm.
Teacher helped with lesson plans and reviewed activities, and the teacher benefited as well because many students use technologies and that at the time teachers were struggling with how to use it. But the thought of empowering students through words of encouragement, through you know um, seeing them in leadership roles, that speaks volumes. And I don't want to kind of take the initiative and talk about Hannah's experience, but had one teacher told her that she can be a leader, she can be an ambassador, she has all it takes, her journey would have been different.
Hmm.
Wouldn't that be the case, Hannah?
Yeah, and I did have some, but it was very few, and it was so difficult when it was one or two teachers, two or three professors, and there was so much negative energy coming at me otherwise within the whole sphere of the entire school, from superintendent to principal to other most of the teachers in the school. That was very difficult. So I think it's just important for people to put the effort into unlearn bias. And as you were saying, Dr. Campbell, too, it's going to save them time if they don't
Mm,
really care personally about the effect it's going to have on students emotionally.
Hmm.
It's going to save them time, and it's going to lead to less conflict in the classroom, less conflict between admin and students, teachers and students, parents and teachers, admin and teachers, or admin and parents. And then going back to that student being upset that there weren't any black teachers. I had my first black teacher in high school, and I really am a big believer in the notion that you can't be what you can't see. So I think it is important to maybe also like show different like leaders in education to a student if they say something like that. Show them different black people that are in leadership positions in education, and even like something like a career day, find somebody locally just within the county or something find somebody to come into the class for a career day,
Excellent, excellent.
inspire the students.
Tara, would you like to add?
Oh, I'm loving all these and bouncing off, but I like where you said help the administrators to understand how helps it helps
That's right.
them.
they will they will bow
So
down to
taking
you.
yeah, do you want this or would you like this or this? So it's kind of like okay, that I like that.
So let's field two more questions and for the panel, and then let's close out. So the first one is, what steps can educators take to check their own biases?
For me, is to establish the classroom standard.
Hmm.
So there are policies, there are all sorts of regulations. I respect that. That's absolutely acceptable. But what goes in my classroom goes through me. I'm the teacher, I'm the leader, I'm in front of the classroom. So I usually, start early on when the class start, like the first day,
Hmm.
and take a couple of minutes to say what's acceptable. How do we treat each other? What happens when the homework is incomplete? What should happen when the homework is in poor quality? Is it okay for you to check your Facebook page when I'm talking? All of that.
Mm.
And then I simply ask them, so which one do you prefer? Do you prefer me to go around the classroom? And many teachers used to see that, just to see, what's on the screen, what's on the computer, because it's the language school. Oftentimes computers are used, or ask you to, turn off your computer while I'm talking. And through the process, I build rapport with the student. And when something goes wrong, I simply point to what we agreed upon. You told me this at the beginning of the class.
Hmm.
Do you think your behavior, your whatever, coincide with it? We get to the point where oftentimes I just stop talking and look at the student, only for them to follow me to my office to apologize. I even issued disciplinary counseling when it was, warranted, and the student accepted it. When you correct a student behavior, if you do it out of care, out of investment in their future, in their academic journey, they appreciate it. But when you do it left and right, that's when not acceptable. And I usually tell them up front how I do it. I would give the student a first warning, second warning, and on the third warning, that's when I would issue the disciplinary counseling.
Hmm.
I would make it very professional. There is no you did this and you did nothing. On such and such date, this happened. This is contrary to regulation number XYZ. Next time, please do one, two, three, four. I give them what they should do, and that's it. They sign, I sign, and that's it. I don't yell at students. I don't, use my voice or mock them or whatever the case is. But you have to agree on a standard. There should be an agreement that you forge with them right up front. And
Hmm.
then through the process, they need to give you feedback. They need to tell you whether you are helping them learn or not. So, as you, as a teacher, as an educational leader, you can grow, you can achieve your objective. Your objective is not to kick students out of the class, but to keep them in the class and help them achieve their learning objectives, whatever they are.
Excellent, excellent. Anybody else?
Just to kind of back off piggyback off of that. That's what I do. I think at the beginning of the year, whether it's elementary up to high school, college, like if you sit down and as a community decide together, okay, is this how are we going to treat each other? How is it going to run? How the classroom's going to? And we all decide together, and it's a contract, and they sign their name, on that contract. So if there's an issue later on, okay, this is what we decided. What's going on here? And you know what made you change your mind? And then, but I at the very beginning, I think is just so
Very
important.
good.
Um, and then that contract, I'm like, I got your
Yes.
signature, right here.
Here it is. It's on the wall. You can see it.
Very good.
Yeah, I was gonna say that self reflection is
Mhm.
really important, and just asking themselves if they're making assumptions in a situation. And unfortunately, sometimes people just have to let go of pride, but sometimes they don't. Um, so I feel like a good question for some teachers to ask themselves if they're struggling with bias is, would I want to be treated like I'm treating these students? Would I
Mhm.
want my child to be treated like I'm treating these students? Is how I'm treating them making them succeed, or is it causing conflict, which isn't going to lead to success? Unfortunately, that's the only way some people will get it. Is if they ask themselves, would I want to be treated like this? Would I succeed if I was being treated like this?
Mhm.
And teachers should constantly be learning, and then if they're making mistakes, and adjusting and learning and
Mhm.
adjusting.
Very good. So let's fill this last question. What advice would you give new teachers?
Hmm. Honestly, first of all, to be authentic to who you are.
Mm.
If you are trying to pretend in the classroom, whatever it is, students will pick on it immediately. So you have to be
Mhm.
authentic to who you are. Second, you have to help the student grow and learn. Students learn differently. Each student learn in a different way. So there isn't a one size fits all. It does mean that you have to do a lot of work. I'm not going to lie about it. There is a lot of work, a lot of preparation that needs to take place. Nevertheless, you have to cater to your learners and you have to find ways to engage them.
Mhm.
Whatever engages them, whether it's a Kahoot activity, a Padlet activity, we need to engage them because we are here for a reason. We have a purpose as educator, which is to empower them. We just want to give them the tools, the resources they need to succeed. My last advice is to make your classroom a safe place
Mhm.
for students to be heard. Just imagine if the student cannot talk in your classroom, they're going to talk somewhere else and they're going to receive maybe not so good advice about learning.
Mhm.
And you don't want that. You want them to come to you first. So these are my kind of 2 senses here.
Excellent. Excellent.
And then I would say also just recognize that each student is completely different, whether, how they learn, home life, just every student is different. So you have to like, get to know your students, not just on paper, test scores, or any of that. Um, and then gives you the knowledge to help them and get to know them, to help raise their confidence and to help raise their achievement levels and things like
Mhm.
that.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, I think getting to know and connect with students is really important. Building relationships with them without making any judgments or having any criticism, and just be willing to unlearn their habits and ways of biased thinking. And it's also important to connect with all students, even if they're not at first connecting with you, whether they're quiet, they're talkative, they're succeeding or struggling. it's important to check in on the students who aren't necessarily checking in with you and making sure that they're okay. And
Excellent.
also with when it comes to punishments and stuff, don't just think, oh, this student's just misbehaving because they want to, because they're a problem kid. You need to connect with them more and learn about them and maybe their situation at home, or is something that you're doing in the treatment of them leading them to misbehave.
And a lot of times they'll test your loyalty. Like, you still gonna love me if I,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
or are you gonna
Yeah.
change your mind?
Yeah.
So,
So as we finalize and end, I just want everybody to go around and let everybody know how to get in contact with you if they wanted to take the course promoting positive racial teacher student classroom relationships, or if they wanted to speak to you about any other type of service you may offer.
Anyone can reach me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is Mishkat Al Mumin, just like my name on the screen, and I'll be happy to answer questions, engage in conversations. I also write every Sunday, and I post on LinkedIn articles that examine the connection between education, leadership, and empowerment.
and they can also find me on LinkedIn under Tara Jones as well. And then I'll attach links to the social media pages and things that I'm getting up and running, because I would love for everyone to be involved in it and give their input. So, but yeah, definitely on LinkedIn, and I will, post the other links to the other sites as well.
Hmm. Very good.
You can find me under my name on LinkedIn, and my email's hcarsonell@gmail. And my link for quarantine racism is quarantineracism.com/question mark ref equals Hannah. And I'm open to any questions if anyone wants to email or message me on LinkedIn.
Very good. I'm Dr. Campbell from Quarantine Racism Educational Services as well. My email is moreinfo@quarantineracism.com. The phone number here is 856-566-3267, extension 402. Hopefully, this has been informative for our viewers and for our future viewers. Feel free to reach out to any of us for any type of questions, any type of feedback, and any type of other concerns. Have a great day, and thank you very much.